National Bureau of Statistics is expected to release new data and methodology for the computation of Nigeria's inflation rate and, of course, the gross domestic product, and that's the GDP. Though Valentine's Day may be over, this could also mark the beginning of Nigeria's love affair with new statistics. So tonight, Babajide Ogunsanwo, founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's data analyst, is here to share more analysis, of course, insights and intelligence about the revised GDP and inflation figures, and definitely tell us this love story between Nigeria and the new figures.
As you've described, it's a love affair between the National Bureau of Statistics, the government, the country.
Yeah, but let's start right away. I mean, the Central Bank of Nigeria had postponed the Monetary Policy Committee meeting, perhaps in order to see the results of the revised GDP and inflation statistics and all those numbers. Is the Bureau of Statistics likely to release these reports this week? And if they do, how will these reports affect the decision of the CBN and, of course, the government at large?
When the National Bureau of Statistics had a workshop with journalists and other critical stakeholders, the promise then was that by the end of January, we will have the new rebased consumer price index, as the inflation, and the new gross domestic product report. The plan was before the end of January. So there's a high possibility that this week will be the week when the new love affair with economic numbers will start. Well, you talked about the CBN, and there are three things Nigerians are really talking about. The first is, what exactly is this GDP CPI rebasing? The second is, how significant are these numbers? And the third is what you talked about, which is, how will these new numbers influence the decision of the CBN? So let's start with the first, which is, what exactly is this GDP rebasing and the inflation rebasing for the common man? And I'll start by looking at this. Yes, we all are familiar with this. Every perhaps 1 to 3 years, it is recommended that you take your optical glasses to an optometrist, your eye doctor, to change the lens. Now, Anne, changing this lens wouldn't change what is in front of you, but it will allow you to see clearly, more clearly, especially if you change it as recommended. Again, it won't change what is in front of you, but it will allow you to see more clearly. And so in simple terms, what the NBS does and a lot of other countries do is every 5 years, they change their economic lens. It doesn't change what is in front of you. If what is in front of you is gold, and it allows you to see how shiny the gold is. And if what you really have in front of you is poo, fizzes, it allows you to see the states of this poo. So what we're expecting is our economy wouldn't change. Your income, the cash you have in the bank wouldn't change, but it will allow data users, the government, and all of us to clearly see what is in front of us in economic terms. So that answers the first question by what exactly is this GDP CPI rebasing. The second question is, how significant are these numbers? You know, and when this GDP concept really was started by Russian Simon Kuznets, the plan was that it was going to allow countries to really measure the value of their goods and services. Then during the World War, it wasn't a political number. However, it has been hijacked by politicians. The inflation reports and how the economy is growing is now more used by politicians than economists, because it has an influence on elections. It allows them to talk about their performance and if they are doing well. And this is even coming very critically because we remember what happened in April 2021 when the INEC released the new dates for the 2023 elections. That was in April 2021. So the expectation is in the next 10 weeks, INEC might be releasing the dates for the 2027 elections. But what's in front of us allows us to answer the third question. How will Nigeria's CBN react to new economic indicators? We remember what happened a decade and a half ago when the CPI was rebased November 2009. Then the moving average inflation rate was 12.68%. It was also the same month that we had the rebasing that the CBN introduced the asymmetric corridor for the monetary policy rate. Then it was minus 400 plus 200 basis points. And then the monetary policy rate was 6%. The concerns and the expectations was that changing and rebasing the inflation rate, the CPI, would lead to better inflation numbers. However, inflation didn't reach single digit until August 2013. Look at what happened in 2014. We rebased the GDP. Then economic growth was 7.5%. Later tonight, I'll talk about, was that economic growth of 7.5 sustained? Last year when the president came in, the CBN's monetary policy rate was 18.5%. The moving average inflation rate was 21.1%. That has significantly changed. The monetary policy rate, which also is like a proxy benchmark for lending rates, is now 27.25%, and the moving average inflation rate is 33.18%. And so that allows us to clearly say that the rebasing of the GDP is just like changing your economic lens. It allows you to see clearly, more clearly, but it really doesn't change what is in front. Definitely cannot be a strategy, since it's just allowing you to see what is in front of you. Rebasing just allows you to clearly know the situation of what you're dealing with.
So talking about rebasing, let's compare now. From the preliminary reports about the economy, how much has changed since the last rebasing of the GDP?
So if we're going to look at it, it's perhaps to look at it about what exactly happened when the GDP was rebased in 2015, what happened in between about 2019, and what is the NBS position. Even though we're expecting its full report this week, it has provided some preliminary information. And in this, and there's some good and there's some bad news. The good news is post the rebasing of 2014, in 2015, what we have by the left column shows that Nigeria's top 7 economic sectors. In the top 7, then you had crop production, number 1, trade, crude petroleum and gas, telco, real estate, food, tobacco and beverages, and construction. What has significantly changed in the last 10 years is that the NBS is saying the good news is real estate a decade ago was position 5, construction was position 7. Now real estate and construction have moved up the ladder. The report we're expecting is meant to show that real estate is now Nigeria's 3rd largest economic sector, and construction is now Nigeria's 6th largest economic sector. Good news for real estate and construction. The bad news, however, is Nigeria's primary source of foreign exchange. Post-rebasing in 2014, crude petroleum and gas was the 3rd largest economic sector. Crude petroleum and gas is now 5th largest economic sector. So we've seen a decline in crude oil, petroleum and gas. Bad news, good news for real estate and construction. All
right, Wiki Babajide, will this rebasing of the GDP and inflation rate lead to probably improvements when we talk about economic growth and development in the country?
It might lead to a spike, again, because we are able to see what is in front of us more clearly. It hasn't changed what is in front of us. And perhaps the best thing is to look at when we rebased the GDP in 2014. Did the economy grow faster or slower? That will point us to what to expect this week. And if you take a look at what has happened post GDP rebasing in 2014, and if you take a look at the chart of the week, the question is, has Nigeria's economy performed better since its last GDP rebasing in 2014? In 2014, after the rebasing was done, we saw a spike. We had new numbers, bigger numbers. Nigeria was now the largest economy in Africa. So GDP grew by 8%. But again, everything that grows large finds it difficult to even grow larger. And so in 2015, 2016, 2%, 2016, negative, 2017, only 1%. And since then, it's just been 2%, minus 3, 3, 3. So the expectation is if we have bigger numbers this year, yes, it will show that we've grown relative to a base period. However, will we be able to sustain the growth? And going by our last rebasing, it shows that we possibly will initially have 1 year of spike, and then we'll probably go flat if we don't have a clear strategy. Again, don't forget, GDP rebasing, and all of what we're about to see this week is just changing the lens. It doesn't change what's in front of us.
All right, thank you very much. Babajide Ogunsewo, founder of Leadership by Data and, of course, Channels Television's data analyst. Thanks for your time and exciting contributions on the news.
The pleasure is always mine.